In 2005, Blockbuster saw the future with absolute clarity. They knew every threat coming their way and documented it. 5 years later, they were bankrupt. So this isn't a story about ignorance. This is the autopsy of a company that had a crystal ball and still managed to fail. Our job today is to determine the precise cause of death.
First, let's establish the patient's condition just before the collapse. And in 2005, Blockbuster's vital signs, well, they looked fantastic. Total revenue was a staggering $5.9 billion. This was not a company showing signs of sickness. This was a global titan, seemingly at the absolute peak of its health.
The first piece of evidence we're going to examine comes straight from the source, from their own annual report. They explicitly acknowledged, in black and white, a fundamental risk, that consumer behavior was changing. They knew the ground was shifting beneath their feet. They saw it, and they wrote it down for everyone to see.
And it kept going. The same report identified a second major threat. You see, they weren't just worried about some far-off technology. They were feeling the heat from big-box stores like Walmart and Best Buy, which were selling DVDs at rock-bottom prices. The attack wasn't just coming from one direction. It was coming from all sides.
They even nailed the technological threat with uncanny precision. They specifically called out personal video recorders, things like TiVo. They understood that these devices let people build their own movie libraries at home, completely cutting out the need to go rent a movie. The very act of renting, their core business, was becoming obsolete, and they knew it.
Now this might be the single most damning piece of self-awareness you'll ever see from a company. Management stated, without any ambiguity, that their market was totally saturated and that, quote, many video stores will be forced to close. Think about that. They were literally predicting their own industry's demise.
Which brings us right to the heart of this autopsy. The big question: if they saw it all coming, why did Blockbuster die? The evidence is overwhelming. This was not a failure of vision. It was a catastrophic failure of action. So let's get out the scalpel and find out why.
Before we can identify the disease, we first have to understand the body. We need to look at the anatomy of Blockbuster back in 2005. It's so important that we avoid hindsight bias here and really appreciate the world they were operating in when they made their decisions. And financially, on the surface, this company was a beast. Nearly $6 billion in revenue, a market value over $1.5 billion. You have to understand, a company of this size has enormous momentum, an institutional gravity that makes it incredibly hard to change course. And let's just put to rest any idea that they were a clueless lumbering giant. This quote from their report shows a highly sophisticated data operation. They had a daily pulse on every single transaction in every store. Their corporate nervous system was advanced. They didn't need more data. They were swimming in it. Okay, now we can begin the external examination. These are the obvious injuries, the writing that was clearly on the wall. And let me be clear, this isn't my analysis. This is a direct list of the threats documented by Blockbuster's own leadership in their report to shareholders. I mean, just look at this. They saw the squeeze from retailers, the disruption from tech like PVRs, the tricky relationships with movie studios, and the fact their own market was full to the brim. The picture they painted wasn't just accurate, it was complete. The external wounds were all identified and logged. But, an autopsy that only looks at the outside is never the full story. The true cause of death, the thing that delivers the final blow, is almost always found on the inside. So now let's examine how Blockbuster's response to these threats became the fatal illness. And here we have it, the fatal disconnect. On one side, they admit to seeing a faster than expected decline of their entire industry. And on the other side, what's their strategic response? To get better at finding locations for new stores. It's just mind-boggling. They saw the iceberg, and their response was to rearrange the deck chairs. So their whole game plan was just refining the past. More stores, better locations, and splashy programs like getting rid of late fees. All they were really doing was trying to build a faster, more comfortable horse-drawn carriage just as the first cars were starting to roll off the assembly line. That no late fees program, it was just a very, very expensive way to patch a ship that was already taking on water. So all this evidence brings us to a final diagnosis. This is a textbook case of what we can call profitable inertia. It's a corporate disease where a company's current success makes it strategically, financially, and even psychologically impossible to pivot to a new reality. Now, this condition has been studied for years. It has a name, the innovator's dilemma. And the central idea is, frankly, terrifying.
It says that the very habits that make a company successful, like listening to your best customers and investing in your most profitable products, can become the very reasons for your downfall.
This table right here, this explains everything. It shows you the why. In 2004, the old-school rental business generated $4.4 billion. It was a massive engine printing cash. Now, any new idea, like online streaming, would have looked like a rounding error in comparison, and even worse, it would directly compete with and damage that $4.4 billion machine. And here is the most critical finding from this autopsy. Blockbuster didn't make crazy, irrational decisions. No, they made perfectly logical ones. They chose to protect billions of dollars in guaranteed revenue instead of going all in on a tiny, unproven, and cannibalistic new model. Their greatest strength became their fatal flaw.
So what's the lasting lesson here? Because the whole point of an autopsy is to learn something that can help the living. The findings from this case are universal. They apply to any successful company in any industry, especially today.
So here's the final report. First, you have to audit your strengths. Look at your biggest cash cows and ask the hard question, how could this become an anchor that sinks us? Second, you have to question your most rational decisions. If something feels like a no-brainer because it protects today's profits, that's exactly when you should be most suspicious. And finally, you have to protect the future, not the past. That means setting aside real resources for new things, even if they look small and unprofitable right now.
The final lesson from the autopsy of Blockbuster is really a question that every single leader needs to ask. Look at your own business, your own career. Look at what makes you successful today, and you have to figure out, before the market figures it out for you, which of your company's greatest assets is becoming its heaviest anchor.